At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
If someone in your workplace refers to a show as content and you hit them and you get called into HR, please send them this episode and tell them that I said it was okay for you to do that.
As Richard Rushfield Lane saying that, just to be clear on the podcast here. Yes.
Don't end for liability reasons.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. This is Sean McNulty of the Wake Up Newsletter here at the Ankler on Thursday, March 6th. I'm joined in Los Angeles by Elaine Lowe and Richard Rushfield, of course. I'm coming to you from the Ankler's new office in the Dominican Republic, where Richard assured me there is an untapped hotbed of new subscribers. Richard, I'm walking around. I'm handing out hats. I'm doing my best here. I don't know.
I think they expect a little more personal service in the Dominican Republic from their morning wake-up columnists.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
I think maybe got to knock on the door, bring breakfast in bed.
You didn't tell me this before you sent me here, Richard. So, listen, had I known this.
They're discerning readers. Just sending off an email is not gonna do it for them there.
Are you doing a personal appearance out there? Are you doing a signing of Ankler hats or something out there, Sean?
I'm just telling everybody my name is Richard Rushfield, so that's working out so well for so basically. But my high school Spanish is holding up pretty well, and I will say, I'm not quite sure how to say ARPU in Spanish, but I'm trying to figure that out. So that's been my goal.
How does EBITDA
translate? It's probably like 10 letters or something across the board, Richard, I will send you regards to the fine people of the Dominican Republic, though. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear from you, Richard. So
yeah, no, huge Dominican following I've had there always. So.
All right, give your best. Yeah. Stay out of the sun. But Leslie Goldberg is going to join the pod a little bit today to talk about the next generation of writers out there in Hollywood, which coincides with the look that Elaine did this week on the 20-something class of next generation executives in Hollywood, or at least the folks that hope to be. They're going to dive into that a little later on. But speaking of the next generation being the true Gen Xers that we are, Richard and I, we're going to leave out the Gen Z member of that conversation. But Elaine, being the strong millennial, insisted we have Matthew Frank on the pod. So Matthew, welcome back to the Ankler Podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Glad to be the Gen Z representation.
You're our resident Gen Z, Matthew. You were contractually obliged to show up whenever we mention Gen Z on the pod.
That was Elaine's actual that he's actually asked to be here. I'm sorry. That wasn't really insisting you had to be there. No. He's showing up. That's it. Get him in the office. He's in the office doing the pod. He's back to the office, Elaine.
Oh, yeah. Very on theme today. We're going to be talking a lot about return to office.
The Gen Zers in the office, Elaine, to be noted, the millennials at home. So I'm just saying. And the Gen Xers in the office, too.
I am recording from home, yeah.
Yeah, and Richard, the Gen Xers in the office. So just for the record, everybody, that's the way we roll. But Absolutely. Obviously here, you don't need to, with the Oscars is 4 days later, 4 or 5 days later, ancient history, of course. Everybody knows what happened on the awards side, but it was nice, of course, for the Emmys, Elaine, to wait a full 4 days before announcing the date for their show this year. So we had a little bit of a respite before we looked forward there. So that was nice.
When are the Emmys this year? What is the date?
September 14th. I'm glad you asked. September 14th.
Mark your calendars.
On CBS, which will be probably in a new era of that company at that point, but we'll see how that goes. But Richard was in the room at the Dolby Theater on Sunday, as he has been for several years. Richard, first, how did the tux come together? Did the tailor just get your sizes just right? Or, please.
They brought an extra tape measure this year to
an extra tape measure. Okay,
make sure I don't know what kind of magic they did, but the folks there at Elite Tuxedos on Westwood Boulevard did very well for me.
Nice plug. I love it. Okay, there we go. So, Richard, you've been there, had many Oscars here, so you have a pretty good sense of how things vary from year to year. What was, what's the temperature? What intel you got for us on what the mood was at the Oscars this year from inside the theater?
Given all that's going on in the industry and the world, surprisingly good mood. I was expecting a lot more sort of murmuring and grumbling, but very cheery. I mean, it's always like, half of it is like, oh, I'm at the Oscars.
Right,
so,
of course.
So people, whatever's going on in the world, people are pretty excited to be there. But, minimal grumbling, I would say.
Okay, all right.
What's the snack review, Richard?
Yeah, he's had a few photos there. I saw in the newsletter.
During the show, under the seats, the snack box was a pretzel with some mustard and either dots or Raisinets.
Okay, not my favorite candy. I'm just going to say it right now, but
You
pretzels.
I could have gone for some Junior Mints instead, but that's fine.
Down the lane. All right, yeah.
At
Put me
the
down for Junior
ball,
Mints.
at the ball after, however, I was smoking a chocolate cigar filled with chocolate mousse ganache,
Ooh, how Willy Wonka.
I know.
liquid nitrogen to make it smoke. I asked caterer Wolfgang Puck how many desserts there were he had made for the ball, and he without thinking he responded immediately 28.
Wow.
So, if the dots were underwhelming,
Yeah, you made up
You
for
made
it
up for
by
it.
far, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm not worried about that. But
I love that
but-
liquid nitrogen
I
smoke
know.
out of a cigar.
I know.
That's clever.
That's the video we should have. That's
Yeah, I was
going to
say, why do we have no pictures of this, Richard?
and
I
they
know.
make it very clear you can eat the entire cigar, the paper, and everything. Like it was all edible.
That's not what you do with a regular cigar?
I hope not.
I've never
Lord.
had one. I wouldn't know.
Clearly, Elaine. Thank you for that follow-up there. Very good. Yeah, it'd be good to tell. Elaine is not a cigar smoker. But Matthew, you, of course, were very active on Oscar night. We were having an active night in Slack there, covering all the gambling markets, like a good hustling Gen Zer that you are. So kind of astounding to see how much Conclave kind of dropped during the show on Kalshi. We were kind of monitoring that as the award night went on. That was interesting, huh?
Yeah, it went from like 22% chance, which is like 3-1, 4-1 odds, all the way down to I think 5%.
Five,
like
6
3-1,
cents, something like that. Yeah.
5-6 cents. Yeah. I mean, it lost the end award and then it just really free falled from there.
It wound up winning what, one the whole night?
Yeah.
I
One
guess,
for
yeah.
adaptive screenplay. And that was
Right.
it. Yeah.
That was it. So that was interesting to watch. But we should note that the fine people at Kalshi decided to fly a plane over the Oscars, which is a no-fly zone, with a banner announcing the odds for the Best Actor race with Timothée Chalamet. So hopefully Kalshi advisor Don Jr. can help smooth that out at the FAA. But that was a fun little marketing stunt. But how much money was out there for the taking for the so-called experts in this town, Matthew? What did all the Hollywood experts leave on the table with the major categories this year?
Yeah, if you took a Nor at the right time, it was 100 to win 550, somewhere in that ballpark.
So when would I have had to bet my $100? That was what, early February or something like that, right?
Yeah, that would have been like late January, before, like after the Golden Globes, before they picked up.
Before the guilds, though. Yeah.
So like that was $11 million worth of action. And then there was also Best Actress. So if you taken Mikey Madison at the right time, similarly, when Nora was not hot, close to 550. So
Wow. Okay. All right. And how about the big Chalamet and Adrian Brody standoff there? How did that betting go?
Yeah, no, Chalamet got some heat, but Brody was kind of always the favorite. So kind of ahead on that. But there was a point early February where if you had taken Brody, it would have been 215 if you bet 100. So
okay, not bad.
Not bad.
What were the odds that his speech was going to last half the Oscars
to be
telecast?
two speeches? Yeah.
Whatever it was, the overhit. So
that's true. But there was also some fun. You could also bet on the ratings, of course, the audience, right? Wasn't that a thing, Matthew?
Yeah, well, that became kind of contentious. This was not the biggest category. There was a little under $100,000 bet on this, but
okay, not much.
They announced after the show, the bet was, will the ratings be over 2023 and or 2024, which were 18.8
and 19.5, I think, right? Yeah.
19.5, yeah. And so it got announced at 18.1, so the unders hit. And then afterwards, I think it was yesterday or Wednesday, they announced that
oops,
there's Hulu numbers too. It's actually 19.7. So
wait, did they not account for that? Because the numbers always change a little bit in the day or so after the telecast.
They did not account for this.
And they also, I believe, don't account for what they consider a view on Hulu. Right.
Yeah, I guess you can get technical about it. But yeah, it's Nielsen rated, Richard. So I think they kind of I had that question too with Richard about that, but I think Nielsen kind of counts it that way as a Nielsen TV household. But yeah, definitely Kalshi learning how Nielsen's work, which is a good thing to learn at some point, right?
Thing to learn. It's a good thing to learn. Yeah. But if you had the dumb money, you won. So,
that's my favorite kind of money out there. So Richard, next year, we got to get you in on this. We got to get your, listen, when you're calling, what was your prediction, Richard? I forgot. Elaine, do you remember what Richard's predictions were for the Oscars?
I don't know. He has like 4 or something. Like 4 people were going to watch the Oscars.
He was pretty, no, I'm saying on the category for Best Picture winner.
Oh, for Best Picture.
I think Richard had a prediction
Complete
long ago.
unknown, right?
No, I did not get it. I I'm telling you, this was.
We have the audio receipts, Richard.
Yeah,
no, I just said I didn't get it. This was not my year, but I now have the formula to win every year in the future.
Which is
don't think at all that they're anything but like sort of international cineasts. I was fooled by having the residual memory of the Oscars, looking for some sort of balance of broad, bigger, crowd-pleasing pictures, and that is not part of the formula at all anymore.
Do you feel like it's going to skew indie in the near future?
I think the number of movies that gross above 20 million in the future will be increasingly few.
For the Oscars. All right. Well, we'll see what bears. Well, Wicked 2 next year. Maybe that's going to be it. I don't know. We'll see. I still have some hopes on that one. So maybe that will be return to the big studio picture, but we'll see.
Oscar has showed you the last 5 years, Oppenheimer is the only exception. And Christopher Nolan is a pretty singular figure.
True.
There's not another Christopher Nolan or not another person that sort of occupies that kind of space of sort of beloved by cinephiles, but also huge blockbuster maker. Apart from that, they're rewarding very small, independent sort of festival favorite films.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if the Paul Thomas Anderson movie can make $200 million next year, because Warner Brothers is certainly hoping that's the case. So we'll see how that goes in next year's Oscars. But we'll put that off for a while. But Richard, I do want to, bring out a little top level here. He said it was obviously the mood in the room was, relatively upbeat and, not the Sturm und Drang aspect of the business sometimes, but it's interesting that, I noted I watched on television. Of course, this is the biggest one-time assembly of movie fans on the calendar. This is, 20 million people. I know it's not the 35 or 40 million it once was, but this is the biggest time where you have people who are interested in the movie business and going to movies. Presumably, you're watching the Oscars if you're somewhat of a movie fan. You have 20 million people watching. And what does Hollywood do? They aired one commercial for one summer movie. This was Lionsgate, Ballerina. The special shout out to Lionsgate for taking 30-second ad time in the show. And Disney Fox had one spot as well. That, of course, it aired on ABC. Disney's the parent company there for the amateur. But this is, the movie's biggest night. And we are 2 months out of summer, it's around the corner here. Even Disney movies, 0 Disney movies. You have no Thunderbolts, no Lilo and Stitch, no Elio. You have no Snow White, a film opening in 3 weeks. And you do not bother to advertise this to 20 million Americans who tuned in, presumably telling you we like going to the movies, Richard. This baffles me, and I still, I don't know. Am I way off on this, Richard? I need to talk this out with my therapy session here with you on this. I don't know.
So my thought is, what do you think the target age for Snow White is for the demo that they're looking at?
That's family. Everybody, take your kids. That's a 4-quadrant. Well, maybe a 4, but I don't know. It's a wide parents and kids. So you across the demos.
Yeah, that's an everyone.
Or grandparents. Right. That can be 70-year-old.
Not everyone. Parents and kids is not everyone.
Okay, but not just 20-year-olds and not just. Yeah, I'm saying demo wise. Like,
I'm talking just age here.
You could give me the 50-year-old parent or the 7-year-old kid.
So somewhere in between. So call it, 38 years old is sort of the median here. What would you suppose the median age of an Oscar viewer was?
What about the Hulu viewers?
175?
Look, the median age of the viewer, yes, is all right, 55, 60, but it's on Hulu, which is arguably that demo is about 40. So it was on streaming this year. So all right, put it out on Hulu then.
Okay, Hulu,
the grandparents can take the kids, that's like, oh, wow, the Snow White movie. I'm going to take my grandkid to go see that. Or, what, Richard, I'm just saying, yes, okay, the age, but why advertise on TV at all for movies if it doesn't work? If you're telling me that's the theory, then I don't buy it.
If they had thought their audience was watching the Oscars, potential audience for summer blockbusters was watching the Oscars, I think they would have been there. And the fact that they weren't tells you that they didn't. So,
all right.
Matthew, did you watch the Oscars live?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you watch it on?
Good question, Elaine.
It's funny. I realized as it started that I was logged out of my Hulu and I didn't remember the password, so I got a Fubo free trial.
Oh my God.
Wow. That's the most Gen Z statement I've ever heard on this podcast. That's very
I missed
good.
like the first half of the monologue. I could not figure it out.
And there's no like live scrubbing on it. You like can't go back a little bit, or it's live.
I mean, I watched it eventually later, but
you can watch on YouTube like a true Gen Zer. Yeah, exactly. Okay, all right. Well, I'll say that, but Richard, I will say I don't think we needed 8 minutes of James Bond theme song. Like what make this show like again promote your own business to the public. I don't, again, these ideas that have been thrown around that everybody seems to still ignore and think that, this is the best use of the time of the show. Always like, this is your biggest night. Use it to promote your business because you know what? You need it. This is not where this kind of, complacency, which we've talked about, Richard. It's like, you got to hustle, man. Like this is not, this isn't 2005. This is 2025. You got to get people to come out to the theaters. Like this is your one big shot where you own the spotlight and you didn't even talk about anything you have going on in your big season ahead of you. So I don't know. That's just my logic. I get your point, Richard, about the age, and maybe you are correct about that, but just something seems wrong in the logic of the universe. There's an opportunity for people always looking for, how do you find people anymore? No one, there's no large audiences anymore. It's just like, well, you just had one. And I saw very little, done about it. So
I just think that these are not the people who are going to see Snow White or Fast and Furious or whatever the hell else is coming out. It's
right. Baby Boy, and they're going to see Mickey 17 because that's coming out this weekend. But Richard,
fun.
You had yeah, okay. You on board for that, Elaine? All right.
I'm going to Indian Wells this weekend. I'm not on board for any TV or movies this weekend. Thank you.
You have a tennis appointment. But Richard, we'll round out the top segment here. You had your State of the Union week here in America. Yeah. So what is the State of the Union here in Hollywood? You have certainly quite a title to put out to the
So I've been doing these for 7 years now. I've been writing my annual State of the Showbiz address here that coincides with the President's State of the Union address.
Yep.
And I went through my declarations of what the state was in the recent years. It went from 2019, it started with the State of the Union as so-so, to pretty effed up, to very messed up, to kind of effed up, to slightly less screwed up. Right. And then last year I said pretty screwed up, but maybe approaching a bottom.
Well, this year it's we're fucked was the headline there, Richard. So I guess you had a change of thought there.
I just, after every year coming in and just saying like things look pretty bad, but maybe we'll turn it around, and maybe, hey, look at that, this movie did okay, and everybody loves Anora.
Right, Barbie's a big hit or something, right? Yeah,
yeah.
Right, years, right.
And look at that. Everyone had fun at the TCA or whatever.
Right, sure. But you outlined 3 things that were really giving you this reason this year, Richard. So certainly, larger picture issues that are just kind of overwhelming at this point, seemingly.
So, I just want to take it in. Normally, my addresses are kind of the laundry list of all the 100 things wrong with Hollywood, from animal rights to DEI to
kid protection, child protections on sets, and child labor,
the problems with the theatrical system and marketing and everything else.
Right.
So
this
year,
was not that. This was not that.
Sure, I tried to boil it down to the 3 things that make me think the end of the world is at hand. And they are the legacy studios' major revenue source is disappearing. We've talked about many times on this podcast, the cable bundle.
It's a lot of money. Yeah, the core. Yeah.
I mean, I say in there, it's not just a slice of the pie, it is the pie, because the pie doesn't work or function without it. So someone said to me about the film industry, they said that all of this is about cable revenue, and even film is about cable. So
okay. So
that's going away. Your major revenue source is going away. It's like if you were the Oreo company and they said, oh, by the way, America's not going to buy cookies anymore. That'd be a real crisis.
Be a problem. Yeah, be a problem. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Number 2, rapacious tech companies now will be given the green light to gobble them up, and they have plenty of cash, and they have a government that is waving them through.
Right. Are you primarily basing that on the regulatory environment that we're expected to see for the next 4 years, or is there something else?
That combined with their financials, which are very healthy and have, as we said, like Disney, Apple has enough cash on hand to buy.
Oh, sure.
Right. The Apple buying Disney scenario that you've discussed before.
Apple could buy all of the studios with cash on hand, frankly, with cash on hand without breaking a sweat. So those 2 things, plus all of them stating their intentions over and over and over again, and others that are on the sidelines stating their intentions that they want to be deeper in the business. So at some point, you got to believe them about that.
Okay. And then the third was, of course, the LA, production in LA, which we've talked about here on the podcast a bit, Richard, but certainly very important to reiterate in terms of the current outlook there.
So we have our business model dying. We have these tech companies poised to step into the void. And we have the city hollowing out in terms of production. So, something called entertainment will go on and something called the studios will go on. And, maybe it'll still be some percentage of the size that it is now. So it's not going to be, radio still exists. Broadway theater still exists. Book publishing is still here.
Yeah.
It's not like anything ever totally dies out. But, this is a major correction.
The tech thing, like, again, they can buy them. But I don't know if they want to own these things. I
don't know who would want to own a broadcast network or a cable network.
Or even the IP. Google has shown no interest in owning any original content. The whole key to their business model is everybody else do the work on their own and they take their cut of the money. YouTube got out of it making it. They were like, this isn't a bad business. Meta did this for a while too.
Right. It's easier to not be in the media business right now.
I will note, just as a counter that what is it, the third or fourth largest company, which had nothing to do with content, never touched any content, a company called Oracle just bought a movie studio. You may have noticed. So you would not think that Oracle would be one. Why would they want to be in the studio business?
Well, first of all, Larry Ellison bought it, not Oracle. First, it's not an Oracle property, so let's be clear about that. Number one, I understand the money comes from Larry Ellison, but he bought. That's David. That's having a son who wants to be in the movie business and be like, okay, I'm going to go do this kind of thing. But Oracle doesn't own it. But it's I get the point, Richard, to a degree. But I don't know. There's just a few private equity is a more likely problem to come in and hey, at a certain point Blackstone's looking, who also has a lot of cash, Elaine.
Right. When we talk about the parallels between the journalism and news industry and the media and entertainment business, that's kind of where the money is more likely to come from when you're looking at what are potential investors or potential buyers. Right. It's PE money.
Not a great narrative either, but I'm not saying, oh my God.
Not advocating for it.
Exactly.
Why is that better?
Oh, no, we're not saying.
No. Nobody's saying it's better.
Richard. We're just probably splitting a hair there. So
not encouraging this, let's be clear.
Just pointing it out for the record. But in terms of the content amount, though, I'd say, no one's buying an asset to make less. MGM didn't buy Bond, to only make Bond movies. Frankly, they want to make TV shows and reality. I'm not saying we'll see if it's a good idea or not, but the content level, if anybody does buy them, they're not buying them to make less content. They're probably
MGM brought Bond so that Jeff Bezos could go to the set and ride around in the Aston Martin, and that is why, in the end, all of them are going to want to be in Hollywood. Everything else is a post facto rationalization. Because they all want to be at the Oscars, they all want to be at the Golden Globes.
I know, but that requires production and jobs, and to say all right, yes, they want to make a lot of things with Bond. They want to go to the Bond TV series premiere too, and they want to, I don't know, who knows, whatever they want to do. But I don't know, in terms of the content level. But give us some hope, Richard. To round out here, you've got a lot of ideas in the piece that I recommend you go read it. But
you offered 7 paths out of the darkness.
Thank you, Elaine. Yes, there you go. Give us some paths you saw, or some things that were giving you a little bit of.
So the path is that entertainment will continue, that these bozos will, despite the fight of Hollywood since the beginning has been a fight of people that with money who buy into the crazy business and then want to make it something bigger than just a bunch of crazy artists having fun, and us investing $200 million, and we just have to see whether the stars have chemistry or see whether the second act clicks with audiences. They want to turn into something bigger. The streamers are the latest iteration of that, trying to make a system that is bigger than the individual content. But at the end, you still need hits. That's a horrible thing.
No matter what,
you can have the biggest. If Netflix goes a year with no hits, Netflix will start to look very different. Netflix has been very, and as well as serving up this business, they've been very good at delivering a steady diet of hits.
Yeah, Richard had a quote here. Rigid hierarchical control has never been what makes the best entertainment. That has never produced the next big thing, and methinks the giant Mega Blob studios are going to find that out very fast. So yes, if they were to be acquired, there's still no path that you do need to still make hits and make money, Richard. So yeah.
And then you come back to, you come back to the same thing you always come back to, talent.
Right.
Stars and writers and directors and lighting people and everything else who are what Hollywood is here for, because we can make compelling stories at the highest level of crafts achievement in the world. And they will eventually come back to that. I think large parts of the infrastructure are not likely to be here when they do it. And
it
I
will
hope
be different. Yeah.
And I hope any of these people live in Los Angeles when that comes around. So.
Yeah.
Now, you also advocated for people slapping each other in the workplace.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Elaine. Excellent point.
So this thing, I've written about it like 20 times, like that people who refer to TV show and films as content really like need to be dealt with, and we need to like we need to make it clear like that is not okay. That is like that is a offensive, degrading word to what we do, and I think violence might be called for. We've said it a lot, but I think
no more hashtag content, says Richard Rushfield. I think that was the bottom line on that one.
If someone in your workplace refers to a show as content and you hit them and you get called into HR, please send them this episode and tell them that I said it was okay for you to do that.
As Richard Rushfield Lane saying that, just to be clear on the podcast here. Yes.
Don't end for liability reasons.
Yeah,
Elaine and I have the same lawyer, so we have to.
But really, if you're listening to this and you use the word content, this is your last
Richard's
warning.
like, look in the mirror and smack yourself. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if you're a reporter that does it, prepare to be publicly shamed in my column soon. So.
Okay, so ban on the word content in 2025 is number 7 on that pathway out of darkness.
Very important. The most important. I love it. That's great. And Matthew, get the word out to the next generation, would you, Matthew? Please spread the word
out. There's a new content vigilante. We're gonna stop to it.
Yeah, let's get a comic book going. We'll have to get this whole thing, and so the kids can relate. So anyway, great copy. You can check it out over there at theankler.com for Richard's all of his thoughts there. A lot of other things he mentions as well. But alas, I have a conga line to get to, so I'm going to hand the mic off here to Elaine to continue on with the podcast. You going to be okay there, Elaine, to bring this one home?
We envy you. Please keep repping the Ankler in the Dominican Republic.
Put my hat on in the conga, my Ankler hat on the conga line. Get the PR
I liked
going
the pic in the wake up this morning of the Ankler hat poolside. Appropriate way to make the rest of us jealous in rainy LA.
Oh yeah, you guys live in LA. You can do it any time of the year. That's for my New York people to make them jealous. But anyway, Elaine's going to take the mic here to lead the charge into the state of Hollywood's next generation on both the creative and executive sides of the equation when we come back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Elaine Lowe in Los Angeles, coming to you from the heart of Hollywood.
And I'm Minori Ravindran in London, reporting from the UK about the international market.
Together, we write the Series Business newsletter for The Ankler.
Series Business is a twice-weekly newsletter for paid subscribers to The Ankler that dives deep into everything you need to know about the rapidly evolving TV industry.
We've got an insider's perspective on where the jobs are, what's selling in the market, who's buying what kinds of shows, the new bottom line for budgets, and, of course, any and all industry shakeups.
Join us every Monday and Thursday for all the essential information you need for your job and career. Sign up to receive Series Business as part of a paid subscription on theankler.com.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Welcome back to the Ankler podcast, where Sean McNulty is bidding us farewell to go back to the pool and will no doubt be taunting us with more pictures of his Ankler cap in tropical locations. Instead, joining Richard and Matthew and I, we have Leslie Goldberg again, the newest member of the Series Business team. Welcome back, Leslie. We've got you on back-to-back weeks here.
Thanks for having me, guys. I love this.
So this week, you wrote about something that I find so interesting. Looking at the CW, RIP to the OGCW now, and its form back then, as a training ground for hundreds and hundreds of writers in the iteration that it took over the last, decade, 2 decades?
Yeah, I mean, especially since Mark Pedowitz was there, and he was there for 11 years before he opted to leave.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. I don't know that this is a topic that's really been explored in depth before. But your thesis basically is that like the CW dying, it's made things that much tougher for writers and the next generation of young writers to come up. You know, people who came up in rooms like Vampire Diaries or many of the many Greg Berlanti shows out there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when the CW was formed, it was formed in 2006 as a joint venture between CBS Studios and Warner Brothers Television. And all of their scripted original programming was going to be done on a budget that ranged between $3.5 million and $5 million per episode. That's low, even compared to today's belt-tightening era, especially for a broadcast network. So when you have a low budget to begin with, you have to hire writers that can help you make this show, but also you're hiring on a budget. You're hiring actors on a budget, directors on a budget.
So translation, younger writers, greener writers.
Yeah, so it basically, the way I entered the story was with an anecdote about Greg Berlanti. His first job, Julie Plec gave it to him. She used to be a development executive working with Kevin Williamson on Dawson's Creek. And she hired Greg Berlanti, who was a friend from college. Greg at the time couldn't get anyone to read his stuff, couldn't get a foot in the door. And within 2 years of getting hired as a staff writer on Dawson's, he became the showrunner.
Which is a wild trajectory. When you hear about the number of young people now who toil away for literally 4 or 5 years as writers' assistants and never even get into the room, like that 2-year trajectory for anybody not familiar is just like rocket,
meteoric,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And basically when the CW was formed, like with these lower budgets, you had no choice but to hire younger and inexperienced writers. And that became a formula, right? And one of the things that the CW was great for is you had 22 episodes. You knew that these shows, even if television's lowest rated show, Dynasty, right? The reboot that the CW did, ran for multiple seasons, even though it couldn't even crack a 1 in the demo or 1 million viewers. But it continued to get renewed for full seasons, 22 episodes. And when you have a long running show that does that many episodes, that creates opportunity. And when you have young writers, that's a great way to gain experience. And there's an entire generation of showrunners today, starting with the likes of the Berlantis and Julie Plec, et cetera, who became showrunners, right? Like I always go back, I think of, Yellow Jackets is probably one of the bigger hits in the last couple of years. Ashley Lyle and Bart Nickerson, their first job was on the Vampire Diaries. They cut their teeth and learned how to produce an episode by going to set of the Vampire Diaries. They had time in the editing bay. These are all skills that are critical to learning how to become a showrunner. And now that the CW under new corporate parents Nexstar is out of that scripted U.S. originals, meaning studio produced fare, that's a key gateway to the industry that has closed for a number of writers and aspiring showrunners.
Yeah, and you mentioned that these were, even the low-rated shows, they ran for a number of seasons. They were 22 episodes each. When you think about the life cycle of a writer and just giving them time to find their legs and to get their bearings and to actually learn on the ground, it's a very different environment than like, here's a 6-episode streaming order. You're going to, break the whole season before, and like, you don't really have time to like adjust or learn or grow is my sense of it when you're working with like 6 episodes on a limited series or something where the next season might not be back around for another like 2 or 3 years. There's like a huge gap in between those.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're working on a show that's only 6 or 8 episodes, the opportunity to hire a new writer, someone who's doesn't have the same experience as everyone else in the pool.
Yeah, you want someone who's done it a million times before.
Especially when you're dealing with a bigger budget show, like anything on streaming these days, you're going to turn to people that you can rely on, meaning either folks that you've worked with before who you can depend on, who can turn in a script on time that doesn't need rewrites, that doesn't need handholding, that is also done on budget. You're going to turn to that person more than you're going to turn to someone who like a newbie writer, who may not have that experience, who may need more time, who may need rewrites, who's never been to set to produce an episode, who doesn't know what to look for in terms of how to budget an episode of television during the writing phase. So it's just there's no more opportunities that the CW once afforded to so many, literally hundreds and hundreds of writers.
And you talked to Julie Plec and Greg Berlanti and Mark Pedowitz. I mean, what do they make of it when they're looking at the landscape of the future without a place like the CW for young writers to land?
I mean, Greg is always the optimist, and that's one of the nicer things about him. And he thinks that younger writers will always have an opportunity, right? You can, if you feel strongly about a script or something, self-finance it, or, make it with your friends and stick it up on YouTube for free, and just to get it out there. His thought is that young people will always find a way to make art. And if you want to do this job, you will do it, and you will find a way to do it, either if it's for free and you're self-publishing your own work to try and get it read by other creatives in the industry who can give you that shot. But in the larger sense, it's just a scary time right now for new writers, because there's fewer jobs because of our industry's contraction. And those jobs are going to be handed to people who have more experience, because there's significantly more pressure to deliver on time and to deliver on budget.
Yeah, they want you to take swings, but it's got to be a success every time. And with the risk aversion that we're facing, that's just what it seems like. And,
exactly.
Richard, when you wrote your State of the Union, when you're thinking about the next generation, given that, as you've said, we're fucked, what are you thinking when you're looking out at 25 and when you're looking out at the next gen of creatives?
I think it's very hard. And I did a talk with Ted Hope on here at lunch the other day, and he talked about something I think was really good. He talked about how you really have to somehow make yourself the specialist in something, the person about something. I think you can't rely that there's going to be a ladder that you can just climb up here and go from one thing or another. You have to become the guy on something. You have to identify yourself. You have to let people get to know you. And I think this is going to be a tough time for people. A lot of writers certainly have a hard time promoting themselves. And I think those people are going to have a tough time right now.
That's kind of interesting, the idea of having to find a niche and to be an expert on something so that you're the guy when somebody wants to call on you.
Yeah. Be the person on spy shows or vampires or whatever. Publish a comic book, publish your blog writing about that. Get yourself out there and don't sit around waiting to find a step on the ladder, because that ladder might not be there anymore.
Yeah, it feels like all the ladders are broken when you talk to people about talking about the showrunner pipeline, or when you're trying to figure out how to become a mid-level or senior level executive at a studio. It just feels like the ladder doesn't necessarily exist in the way it used to, except for our ladder, the ladder at the Ankler, which anyone who's early on in their career should join. That was a terrible early segue plug. Mm-hmm. But no, it's a good community. And and that's the thing. I feel like we need to build out these communities outside of the traditional systems, because you talk to people, and I talked to a lot of young people this past week for a story that I did on Gen Z, and it's where do you find mentorship anymore? Where do you find community? Where do you figure out how to learn what's next? And this is a community too, when you think about this crop of 20-somethings, that the literal past half decade has been marked by the pandemic, where a lot of them who graduated in 2020 or 2021 have only ever known this environment as their work environment, this remote/hybrid work environment, which is very much not the way business is done in Hollywood. And then there were the strikes, and they experienced a little fleeting peak TV boom and bust in 2022, and then it all went away. Matthew, when you talk to your fellow peers in your cohort, what are the young saying about the work environment these days?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what you pointed out, right? Where if you're working from home, you're not really developing those same skills that being in the office affords you. And it also prevents you from having that sort of mentorship or apprenticeship. And it makes it harder to get into that role once you get into it, even if that is possible anymore, because the rungs to get up the industry just aren't as solidified anymore. So it makes it really tough. So people make an effort to do things in person to avoid a lot of the downsides of work from home, but it's a challenge.
Yeah. It's funny. Something that our social media guru here at the Ankler, Abigail Barr, said to me when I was working on this story, which I thought was so interesting, is she said that if your job is just a window on your computer and then you use your computer to watch Netflix, it's your job is not going to be a whole part of your identity. Your job is not going to be the thing that you so closely associate yourself with. And I was oh yeah, I guess that's right. If you shut your laptop and it's am I still this thing that I say that I am between the hours of 9 to 5 anymore? Is it as much a core part of who I am?
Yeah, it's really tricky, right? I mean, if you work from home, it's like you can kind of do anything. Like it doesn't really afford you the ability to kind of become enmeshed in it if you're not in the office working with your peers, like especially if you're not with coworkers all the time, right? Like I've talked to a couple people who like, they'll be in the office, but they'll be like the only young person like on their department. So it's not like they have that kind of group mentality. It's your job is a couple of tabs on your computer. So it's tough to really solidify yourself.
That's wild. I mean, I don't know. Like, Leslie, what do you make of that?
I mean, as someone who loves working from home, I can only speak to my experience, but before COVID, I was in the office every day. I barely took any time off. I was addicted to my job.
Yeah, you strike me as somebody who's like a reporter's reporter as well, and like sort of comes from this cohort of like, we are what we do.
Yeah, I mean, the job defined me. And
yeah, same.
And I let it. And one of the nice things that came out of working from home was, for me, I got to learn work-life balance for the very first time in my career, which is a crazy statement to say. I'm 50 years old now, so I'm a nice Gen Xer here. But the idea that I was so willing to spend all day, all night, even when I got home. There was one time I remember I was at work at the office until 7 p.m., came home and took my dog out for a walk as soon as I got home, and then got beeped with a story and had to rush home, like literally running down the block to get home to my laptop with the dog. And it's, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and I'm still going. Yeah. There were just no boundaries. And, one of the things that I liked in your piece, Elaine, was this next generation is setting those boundaries.
Oh, they're setting those boundaries. They're not responding to any 9 p.m. emails.
Yeah, the one woman that says, I'm not going to respond to your email at 9 p.m. because I'm in bed. It's like, I just started going to bed before 10, and it's great. And it also means that no one's going to ping me that late at night because I'm asleep. I'm not going to respond to that, I respect that, but I also know that I probably would not have been able to climb the ladder the way that I did in my journalism career had I not had my foot on the gas going 80 24/7.
Yeah, I do wonder what that's like, especially if you're in like a really high pressure cooker, like an agency environment or a Netflix or one of those entertainment companies that sort of very famously requires you to work, and really push yourself at all hours of the day. And, I talked to one young agent who was 29, but, was sort of on the cusp of like a young millennial or old Gen Z. And, was very much so like, I feel like the cohort that came right behind me who started becoming agents in the pandemic, just like their phone demeanor is different. Like they don't know how to yell at somebody on the phone the way you're supposed to when you're an agent, which is like, you're not like threatening the person with violence, but you also do need them to like cut the check. You need a studio to cut a check for your client who was the person you're advocating for. And I found that to be such an interesting idea. The idea that first of all, the reason that agents are the way they are is because, they're advocating, they're in a way they're doing advocacy work, right, for their clients. But also there's a certain way that you do it. There's a certain posture, there's a certain voice that you do it. And there's like a certain parameters for what's like sort of considered appropriate in that world, even when you're hollering at somebody on the phone.
I can't even fathom that in this landscape that we're in now, right? The post-Me Too space where, I used to be a yeller. There were instances where I would hold a story for weeks and months. And I think there was one story I held it for 8 months because the talent wasn't ready to announce it. And I was told up and down that the minute that the PR put pen to paper in drafting the release, I would be looped in. And then that didn't happen. And I remember being outside. I had to walk outside my house because it was during COVID. And I was yelling so much that I started crying. I started shaking. My wife came out. She was on Zoom in her office. And she's like, the entire writer's room wants to know who you're yelling at and why, because they could hear me from outside. And I'm just like, it took me like days after that to get over that. And for what? You know what I mean? It didn't help my relationships with anyone because I got screwed on a story. It certainly didn't help me, and it's like, I can't fathom anyone being a yeller in this landscape now. So I don't even know what that looks like,
Yeah, right. It feels much trickier too to like be a person who brings big feelings to work. But yeah, like it's the way this generation, the way the next gen is like handling it, I just find so endlessly interesting. And I feel like every generation has its own professional trauma. For me, as a millennial, it was like 2007, 2008, like graduating right into a recession was horrible. And like people sort of hid out in grad school, or, we were all sort of like piecing together freelance work for years until we were able to get full-time jobs. Like people were like still living at home with their parents for like way longer than they needed to. But it's like every generation has something like that. But I don't feel like there's anything that's been as precedented as what this gen has gone through, like with a global pandemic and everything. And I'm so curious to see 10 years from now how that's going to shape the rest of this ecosystem, which has, I feel like, run on very different vibes for like decades now.
Yeah. I mean, if you're, 10 years from now, are you going to have agents that are still yelling, first of all?
Right.
And how big is their HR file? Right? Like, and from a writer standpoint, are they going to be qualified? Are writers going to be qualified to go to set to produce episodes? Are there going to be now just separate writers who just live on sets to produce these episodes that they didn't write because it's more cost effective to hire someone locally wherever the show is shooting than it is to send a writer from LA to Atlanta or Toronto or Vancouver to cover their episode in their hotel room, and then when that episode's done, you literally do it again with a different writer, right? Those are all costs that add up at the end, for a budget that's under scrutiny now. And it's like, if you're a decade from now, like, are these shows being produced any differently because of the cutbacks that are happening today? And because there is no next place like a CW or even Freeform, which quietly exited the scripted original space, that trains this next generation of writers.
Richard, how much of this do you feel like is just hand-wringing? You've seen a couple cycles of this business already.
No, as I said in my End of the World piece, I think everything is going away. Like, this is one thing, like a lot of basic stuff and a lot of the things we're used to. And, let's be honest, Hollywood is once you get in the door and if you're established, it's a very cushy place to work. It has been. And a lot of that is going to be cut here.
Yeah, but getting in is tough. Matthew, when you're talking to your friends who work in the business, what's the vibe? What do you guys talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like, at least on the agency side where a lot of people start out, it's a lot of like, can I move up? Can I get to this next desk? Because a lot of people, and you talk about this, a lot of people at the top just aren't leaving their posts, right? So when you have that happen, there's sort of this backlog. And especially for a cohort, like you mentioned, that aren't learning these skills, aren't learning to be aggressive. If you're on the writer side, you're not going to set, you're not learning all these things. They'll just kind of toil away there. And there's a fear of that. There's a concern that if you, aren't able to, develop those skills and move up, it's a challenge. And I think for people my age on the younger side of that Gen Z demographic, maybe it's a little bit of like, you're hoping within a couple of years you can at least get something going. And it's almost like survive till you are 25. Like if you can actually get like a place in your career, like at that point where, something you're on a desk that matters, you're in a position that, affords you some sort of training or, at least has the ability to get you to that next level. Like there's a fear that you can't really move up.
What I find interesting is I think the agencies are probably the one institution left that does still have a more traditional hierarchical system of mobility, right? Like you still start in the mailroom, you become a coordinator or trainee, and then you become a young agent. Like I can't really think of anything analogous where there's that defined of a trajectory.
I mean, there's the writer's assistant, the production assistant with the expectation that after a little while you're going to get promoted to staff writer, and then you continue to climb that ladder.
But you can get like stymied at that writer's assistant's phase for years. Like I said, I've talked to people who are like, I've been a writer's assistant in like 5 different rooms. Like, when am I going to get my shot? Like, I think in an agency mailroom, there's like a set time that you're basically in there. And is my understanding of it.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's used to be the way that it worked as a writer, right? Like if you had one show or one season and you're continuing to stay on the same show, you're a writer's assistant there, then the next season you're going to get bumped up and so forth. So if you're a staff writer, you get bumped up to the next rung. But when you're working on a show that's 8 to 10 episodes and it only airs every 3 years, there's no room for advancement. That's where, again, just to bring it back to the CW, when you have 22 episodes and you're going to be on the air for 5-10 seasons, you're going to get tons and tons of experience and you're going to continue to climb the ladder. And when you don't have shows that are running beyond 3 or 4 seasons that are only producing a grand total of maybe 40 episodes, if you're lucky, no one's going to get the experience they need. Or few will get the experience they need, I should say.
Yeah. Well, we're always interested in hearing from listeners and readers, especially if any of this resonates with you. Don't forget to email us at podcasts@theankler.com. You can also reach me at Elaine@theankler.com, Richard at theankler.com. I think it's just first name at theankler.com, except for Leslie is Leslie.Goldberg at theankler.com.
Oh.
Make sure you have that. I know, fancy. But thank you, as always, for listening, everyone. As we go on, I think we'll be exploring a lot of these kinds of issues from all sorts of different angles, and we're very interested in hearing from you all. Thank you again for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our suite of newsletters at theankler.com and follow us on our socials at The Ankler. We'll see you all next week.